What's going on, y'all? Psych Perspectives, GeoFucks here. And this is going to be a video discussing the dysfunctional, toxic, narcissistic relationships between black women, black girls, mother and daughter relationships, daughter and mother relationships. Now, disclaimer, everybody in the black community isn't having these dysfunctional, toxic, narcissistic relationships. Okay, everybody doesn't have, mothers that basically are sabotaging them in their well-being and jealous and holding all of this animosity, sowing in seeds of low self-esteem, lack of confidence, lack of self-worth. Everybody isn't growing up like that. There are people that actually have healthy, functioning relationships with their parents, with their children, with their friends, with their siblings, with their other family members, with their significant others. Everybody is not dealing with this, okay? I just want to make sure I put that disclaimer there, because I know, when I'm talking about these situations, it seems like that's all I'm talking about, but that's also because that's the upbringing that I grew up in. You know what I mean? And granted, I had good moments, I had positive moments, I had healthy, loving moments as well, but overwhelmingly, if I'm just going to keep it a buck, it was a lot of dysfunction and toxicity that should have never really been taking place. However, people are products of their environments. And I'm not saying this to justify it, but just to give a bigger, broader picture. You see why people do the things that they do and say the things that they say when you look at the upbringing and environment that they grew up in. It's really not a surprise when you look at how a lot of us grew up. I'm just gonna keep it real. So let's get to the video. Okay. So the relationships between black women, black girls, mothers and daughters, daughters and mothers. A lot of times, this is what cracks me up about black people, because especially black American people, because so many of us claim to be, so many in the black community are homophobic and transphobic. Yet, when you look at the so-called gender roles in the black community, they're not quote unquote traditional. Because again, when you look at how black mothers tend to raise their black daughters, you're raising your daughters to be strong-willed, to be masculine, as you say. Okay, because think about it. Oftentimes, especially when you look at if there's multiple kids in the family and the daughter is the oldest or close to being the oldest, even when she's not the oldest, because she's a girl, it's perceived that she needs to be more responsible. She's going to have more responsibilities. She needs to be cooking and cleaning. She also needs to know how to mow the grass and change the oil. I mean, it's really funny to me when people want to talk about gender roles in the black community, because oftentimes the black girl is treated basically like a surrogate son anyways, if we're going to keep it real. Very so often do you actually see black girls actually being able to be feminine and told to be feminine. Most of the damn time, you're literally giving her the responsibility, and I'm using y'all terms because in my opinion, regardless of your gender, you need to know how to take care of yourself and provide for yourself. So knowing how to cook and clean, to me, are basic life skills. Knowing how to change oil, how to mow the lawn, how to wash a car, these are basic life skills as far as I'm concerned. And it shouldn't matter if a person is a man or a woman, a girl or a boy, non-binary, gender fluid. It really shouldn't matter. These are just life skills that you should know. Either know how to do or know how to pay for the service to be done. You feel me? But anyways, again, you don't allow her to be feminine anyways. I mean, when you look at how a lot of black women are raised when they're little girls, and there's always this uncanny jealousy amongst the women, amongst the girls and the mothers and their daughters. It's like the mother is constantly competing with her own child And it's so dysfunctional because it's like, that's your child. So why are you sitting up jealous of your child getting attention or getting respect or getting admiration? You know, why are you envious of your own daughter? And again, a lot of black women, let's just keep it real, some of them will deny this, but all you have to do is look at the animosity between the mother and daughter. And then also look at how the mother treats her sons. Treats her sons, her boys, very differently. Okay, the boy can do no wrong half the damn time. You know, he's loved and doted on and treated totally more lenient with the son than she is with her daughter. You know, the daughter can't have boyfriends, but the son can have a girlfriend. The daughter can't be out past a certain time. Meanwhile, the son is allowed to be out at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And again, the son is the one most likely to be shot and killed, end up in drugs and gangs and violence. So if anyone needs to have a damn curfew, it's really that son. But again, because of sexism and misogyny and patriarchy and this belief that, you know, boys can't be victims or, you know, be hurt or harmed, you know, and they should have, you know, more freedom and rights than the girls or the daughters. You know, these types of behaviors and mentalities and ideologies, in my opinion, create the problems in our community, you know. And don't get me wrong, I will be doing a video discussing the relationship between black mothers and their sons, and black fathers and their daughters, and black fathers and their sons, and black fathers and their children, period. You know, these relationship dynamics need to be addressed more often because there's a lot of issues. And again, disclaimer, we know that there are healthy functioning relationships between black folks. We know this. And it's amazing that there are, and I wish we had more of them. But it's also obvious that that's not always the case, and that's not always the norm, because again, so many of us can relate to these situations or know people that have gone through these types of relationship dynamics. So it's clear as day that people aren't just making this shit up and, you know, spreading a stereotype. Because obvious, if damn near everybody you know doesn't have a father, doesn't know who their father is, or they know of someone that their father was absent or not always with them in the house, then obviously this isn't just people making up shit, you know, which is another problem in the black community. People love to live in denial about what's going on in the community. People really will sit up, that's not all of us, and blah, 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 and ignore the obvious. There's so many elephants in the black community that's just roaming around freely and have been doing it for decades, centuries at this point, and it's just ridiculous. That's my seat. You know, I drive a 2009 Chevy Malibu. But it's just crazy to sit back and see these relationship dynamics play out. Also, black mothers, be mindful of how you talk to your children, okay? Because this constantly calling your daughters bitches, hoes, heifers, sluts, you know, calling them out of their name, degrading them, belittling them, the name calling, the chastising, that isn't positive. That's not good. That's a negative. And it ends up creating low self-esteem. It ends up creating low self-worth, lack of confidence. And again, if your first bully is your mother, it's not a good way to start life, okay? And a lot of girls are literally being called bitches, hoes, sluts, whores, nappy-headed, you know, just all kinds of derogatory, negative terms, degrading terms, and that's how you're talking to your child? Let alone that's how you're talking to another human being, but that's your actual child. And again, you wonder why so many black girls don't have self-esteem or they're very low. You wonder why they don't have any self-esteem and don't have any self-confidence. And then you also wonder why so many black women put up with that type of behavior from their partners, their significant others, their boyfriends, their husbands, their girlfriends, their wives, whoever they're talking to, even within their own friend group. Platonic relationships be just as toxic because, like I've said in numerous videos, we often base our relationships off of what we grew up with. So if we grew up with name calling and being called out of our name and disrespected and degraded and belittled, we're going to think that's normal. So people end up going into other relationships where they're being called bitches, hoes, sluts, and everything but a child of God, because they think, oh, well, my mom called me these things. My dad called me these things. I grew up in a household where this was constantly happening. So, you know, I guess my husband, my wife, my significant other, my partner, my friends, they're okay to degrade and disrespect me too. It becomes a pattern of behavior because that's what you're used to. That's what you're accustomed to. That's the type of environment a lot of black women and girls grow up in. I'm just calling it for what it is. Okay? Another thing in the black community that needs to be discussed, especially pertaining to mothers and daughters, daughters and mothers, black women and girls, black girls and women and black women. And again, I'm going to do a video discussing my perspective and opinion on black mothers and their sons, black fathers and their children as well. Okay? So another thing that comes to my mind as well is also learning about boundaries and respect. Again, in the black community, we have a lot of child molestation, rape, sexual abuse, sexual assault, sexual harassment in the community. And there's too many cases where the black mother has allowed her child to be put in harm's way. It is what it is. You know, you really have black women and women in general, regardless of race, but because we're talking about the black community, you have black women who will put a man above herself and her children and herself, you know, all for the sake of saying that she has a man. Meanwhile, the man is sexually assaulting and abusing her children, physically abusing her children, physically abusing her, sexually abusing her, and that'll be allowed because I got a man. And you will know that your child is being victimized and sexualized and abused, but, you know, we're going to sweep that underneath the rug. How many people have been victims, survivors of sexual molestation and assault and abuse as children, went to the mother, went to the parental figure, went to the guardian, the caregiver, the caretaker, and they dismissed you. They straight up played it off like you didn't even tell them that you've been touched by this grown-ass person. How many times has that happened in the community? And it's dust underneath the rug. And then again, because again, in our community, mental health is constantly downplayed and underlooked and undervalued, what ends up happening is you have people who, they came to you, they expressed that this was going on, that they're being hurt, that they're being touched, that they're being sexually abused, they're being physically abused, they're being, you know, made fun of and ridiculed and degraded. And when you have people that you trust and you're telling them that, and then they're turning around and telling you that that's not what happened and you're lying and how dare you accuse such and such of doing this and you always lying and you fast, because that's another thing that's constantly used against black girls is, oh, you're fast. Meanwhile, it's a grown-ass person talking to a 12-year-old. How is a 12-year-old going to seduce a grown-ass person? And I'm saying person because it's women out here sexually abusing folks and it's men out here sexually abusing folks. People, regardless of sex and gender, are sexually abusing folks that are underage and of age, okay? So you telling them that this is going on and they're dismissing you and accusing you of lying and going out of their way to protect the person that's abusing you. What does that do to your psyche, especially as a child? You're probably going to realize nobody really cares about what I have to say. So you're going to probably stop speaking up for yourself. You're also going to learn that you don't really have any protection here, because clearly your mother, your father, your parental figure, your guardian, your caretaker doesn't care to protect you. And the person that's harming you is getting protected and getting supported. So what kind of message is that going to send to that little girl, to that child? What is going to happen there? And then, like I said, these are patterns of behavior that will unfortunately and more than likely in many cases is going to continue. So that first sexual assault, that first sexual abuse, that first sexual harassment, in many cases is going to follow that little girl. She's going to have more sexual abuse, more sexual assault, more situations where her bodily autonomy is taken from her, and she doesn't have the autonomy to say no. Her boundaries have been crossed. And again, where do we learn boundaries? We learn boundaries in the first 5 years of our lives. You know, from the moment you come out of the womb, okay, the moment you're birthed, 0 to 5 years old, those are the most pivotal years in human development. So you're supposed to be learning about boundaries and, you know, agency and being able to speak up for yourself, being able to express yourself, you know. And a lot of times, especially in the Black community, the child molester will be supported and protected. People will know who the child molester is in the family, in the community, in the friend group, and protect that person. Backwards. And then you wonder why we have all of these issues later on in life as adults. Because we all know the uncle that nobody should leave their kids around. We all know the aunt that's questionable, that likes younger boys. We all know this. And it's okayed and, you know, oftentimes dismissed or even seen as the inside joke. Like, how is it a joke that you have a predator in the family, in the community, that's abusing people and children? How is that okay? You know, and this is what's normalized in our community, and it needs to be talked about. Like I said earlier, the elephants, they just trampeding around the community. And there's multiple elephants. That ain't just the only one. So again, then you got the low self-esteem, lack of agency, don't know how to speak up for yourself, afraid to speak up for yourself. Then the people that's harming you are being supported and protected. It's a recipe for disaster. You know, and this is often what's happening. And then this is constantly building animosity between the daughter and the mother and the daughter. You know, and especially if the mother is in a relationship with the man that's sexually abusing, or the person that's sexually abusing her child, she's going to do everything. In so many cases, that mother is going to do everything in her power to keep that relationship, regardless of the fact that her daughter or her children are being harmed and victimized and brutalized. You know, again, the movie Precious from 2009, everyone's like, oh, that's just a movie. It's based off of a book, Push. I read that book in like 9th grade. So like 2 years later, the movie came out. Crazy. But anyways, that book, Push, which led to the movie Precious in 2009, and everyone's like, oh, that's just a movie. That's not, that situation is more common than we care to acknowledge, than we care to admit. Okay? And that's what's sad and sick and disgusting. And again, you wonder why so many in our community lack self-esteem, self-confidence, you know, no boundaries. And again, you realize that little girl grows up and she starts seeing those same patterns in her relationships with other people. You know, if she's heterosexual and she's dating men, she's going to likely have those same dysfunctional, toxic dynamics in her relationships. And it's a recipe for disaster. You're literally setting that little girl up to be constantly victimized by men in the relationship, because her first introduction to sex, to men was abuse and toxicity and dysfunction. And it's not to say that people can't heal and learn positive, healthy relationship dynamics, because you can. There is the possibility of that with therapy and counseling and support. But let's keep it real. Most of the time in the Black community, there's no counseling, there's no therapy, there's no support. It's just a continuum of dysfunction and abuse and toxicity. And this is another reason why I'm such a big advocate for mental health, and why I strongly believe in universal health care, so everyone can have access to quality, affordable, accessible, and inclusive mental and physical health care. You need those services and resources so you can live an optimal life, in my opinion. Information on everything that I just discussed and covered will be in the description box below. This is already over 20 minutes and I'm getting ready to go to the gym. So again, information is in the description box below. And again, disclaimer, we get it, we know this is not every Black girl, Black woman, this is not every mother and daughter in the community, this is not every relationship. There are healthy and functional relationships in the Black community. There are healthy and functioning mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, families, okay? Platonic and romantic relationships in the Black community, and that's beautiful. And the goal of me expressing this is, one, this was a viewer request, and secondly, in my opinion, we are not going to solve the problems in our community until we actually speak about the problems in our communities and be willing to have the hard conversations, be willing to be held accountable for the things that you say and do. You know? Anyways, sending everybody love and positivity, and I hope and wish that everyone gets the healing that they deserve, and I'm out.